electricity was first introduced in Lagos in 1898 by the colonial authorities. All right, so it was the colonial government, the British in particular, that first introduced electricity, to Lagos. This electricity made homes, and street lighting possible during this period. It actually, transformed Lagos, and being the center of socio-economic activities, in what later became known as Nigeria by 1914. During this period, electricity infrastructure was limited to the European residential areas. All right, so there was also, it was not just that electricity was provided and everybody, no, the electricity that was introduced at the earlier phase, all right, was, basically meant to serve the interests, all right, of the European communities, and the expatriates in Lagos. During this period, it was normally switched off at 11 p.m. because, among other factors, the staff, in charge of the facility were very few. Okay, this required foreign technicians and all of that. So the first of the, in terms of the installation of the electricity facilities, the Ijora power station was first commissioned in 1923. All right, so it was the major source of electricity supply to Lagos and its environs during the colonial period. The Ijora power station A was the first of the major electricity facilities or infrastructure installed in Lagos. At inception, it had a capacity for generating up to 20 megawatts of electricity from steam turbines and coal-fired boilers in Lagos. So in the late 1940s, of course, subsequent upon the rapid expansion and rapid and increasing need, for instance, for power supply, a second phase was necessary. The second phase was commissioned at Ijora again. This was known as the Ijora B. The first one was Ijora A, all right, in 1923. Don't forget. So the second installation was Ijora B, all right. The plant at this time had a capacity of generating 85 megawatts of electricity. Okay, 85 megawatts of electricity. The station was oil fired at this time, and this made it the most modern power station in the country. The Ijora B was also formally commissioned by Queen Elizabeth II of England when she visited Nigeria in 1956. And the third stage of improving the electricity installation in Lagos was in 1960, when additional 30.2 megawatts of electricity was installed, totaling, making everything 142 megawatts. And subsequently, by the post-colonial period, a fourth phase at the station witnessed the addition of 3 new gas turbines, all right, in 1978, each with a capacity of 20 megawatts. So all of this is very good for you to have a good understanding of the changes and continuity in electricity infrastructure in Lagos since the colonial period. So the question that should resonate, that should come up in our minds at the end of this class is that why is it that since 1898, when electricity was first installed, and since 1923, when the first installation Ijora A was installed, Nigeria has not been able to transcend beyond the mediocre output, all right, in terms of electricity generation, distribution, and transmission. And this is a very critical question. All right, to what extent can we appraise the post-colonial government, or can we say that the colonial government didn't do enough in actually providing good structure for electricity? Or could it be that the post-colonial elite have been quite prodigal, all right, and unable to manage and sustain and consolidate most of the colonial innovations? So it is important to know that these improvements that I've talked about, electricity generation and distribution, was a huge cost to the consumers during the colonial period. Just as today now, people speak about ban A, it's quite exploitative, the tariffs are too high, we no longer enjoy the benefits. Even those on ban A presently don't they hardly have steady electricity. All right, in terms of taxation without consumption is still a major problem. So the charges for electricity supply and consumption in colonial Lagos varied with consumers' income and circumstances, and it is very important for us to play to state that clearly. The people, of course, in the urban areas the populated by the Europeans and the elites, all right, paid different fees compared to those in the rural areas and all of that. So the people bore the masses, for instance, bore the cost of colonial government, the colonial government incurred to plant to install these electricity facilities. Also, consumers in colonial Lagos mostly did not maximize the services in relation to the cost they expended on electricity payments. As a popular Lagos newspaper expressed the minds of Lagosians in the 1930s, and I quote, "When light was first installed in Lagos, the charges per unit was 8 pence. Now, with an enlarged staff and very big plants with less illumination, the cost is 1/3 per unit." And this is also it's been a recurring decimal also in the post-colonial period. Of course, the fees or the charges also further increased, all right, and this contributed to default in the payment of electricity bills by Lagosians, especially in the context of the prevalent economic depression in the colonial period from the 1930s up to the 1940s. So the government therefore resolved, colonial government, in a way to compel people to pay, all right, resort to litigations to check, to mitigate the trend, where people boycott or default, in paying electricity bills in Lagos. And, at the end, colonial government was compelled to write off many bad debts. So, typically, a consumer during the period, was a consumer supply was disconnected if a bill, was not settled after 7 days of its insurance, just as it was before prepaid meters were have now become the standard, all right, in terms of electricity consumption in Lagos and other parts of Nigeria. So with the defaults, consumers were allowed up to 5 weeks instead of 7 days, allowed by colonial ordinance to redeem their debts. So in 1933 and 1934, the colonial government had to cancel several bad debts amounting to £26.18 and £28.5 respectively, as a result of, on the one hand, the failure of the colonial government to provide steady electricity, and also the refusal of the people, consumers, to also pay for what they didn't use. Okay, so consequently, the commissioner of the colony proposed measures to check the incidence of default which had led to the accumulation of debts in Lagos. Separate card indexes were created for two categories of consumers in Lagos during this period. One card for those who had no tangible reasons for not paying their bills, such as the colonial officials, firms, owners of substantial amount of properties, and civil servants. All of these ones had no reasons why they shouldn't pay their electricity bills. The other card would be for other consumers, the traders, the petty, peasants, and all of that. So payment of consumer utility was recorded on this card, and this was, so you can see, when even in 21st century, some areas in Lagos, still lamenting about the problem of estimated billings. We don't have meters, we don't have prepaid meters. A house, like a room self-contained, could be supplied a bill of 80,000 naira, all right, where the occupants are not producing bread or cement and all of this. So this was the situation in the colonial period. You could see how the colonial authorities solved the problem of exploitation, all right, by trying to provide cards that would reflect the consumers utility of these facilities, of these services. So throughout the colonial period, electricity, even though was rationed in Lagos, it was supplied to a growing number of people. Some of the major factors that actually affected the supply of electricity in colonial period was rising population, and sometimes the delay in the delivery of materials from United Kingdom, all right, the installations, the machines, and all the relevant instrument needed to sustain the installations. So of course this affected electricity supply in colonial Lagos. Due to the inadequacy of the required megawatts, several regulations were introduced which placed restriction on the use of electric appliances in Lagos. All right, so for instance, people were not allowed to use certain equipment in their houses. Consumers were urged to obviate further restrictions by peak period from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. All right, users were refrained from using, for instance, cookers, electric kettles, iron, and other heating appliances in Lagos in a way to reduce the stress on the installations. All right, consumers were also not allowed to switch on fans except when necessary. None of these, the uses of electricity facility in Lagos was regulated by the colonial government, whether you paid your electricity bills or not. And this was the situation. So all water heaters were switched off during the peak period, and defaulters were threatened with disconnections. And it was under this deplorable situation that due to several petitions and yearnings and mobilization against the government, that Electricity Corporation of Nigeria, ECN, was established under the Nigerian Ordinance 1 of 1950. It was saddled with the task of generating and distributing power for people not just in Lagos now, but to other parts of Nigeria. And it was an autonomous commercial enterprise in which operated in Lagos and Nigeria. It was a monopoly system, all right, in the context of electricity generation. So with this initiative, with this power generation by states, all right, firms and individuals also were permitted and were licensed, all right, and this required that the operators of a plant must generate electricity not exceeding 10 kilowatts for domestic purposes, all right, and up to 200 kilowatt for industrial purposes. So in the same way, the federal government also at independence also licensed the Nigerian Electric Supply Company, NESCO. The Electric Supply Company, NESCO, was also licensed by the federal government to provide to operate hydroelectric power stations and to generate electric power for the tin mining companies, especially in Jos and other parts of Nigeria. So several industrial and commercial concerns applied for licenses to operate various types of electricity generating plants in from 1950s and 1960s. For instance, we have the West African Fishery and Cold Storage, all right, who also was able to generate about 40 kilowatts of electricity in 1950s. By 1951, 6 other companies or firms had been licensed also to complement the efforts of government and other private establishment in electricity supply. One was the Amalgamated Engineering Company Limited. 2, the Pauline Company Limited. 3, we have the AG Leventis and Company Limited. 4, we have the Colonial Development Corporation West African Limited. Then we have the West African Publicity Limited. All right, and subsequently, the number increased to 8, and in 1958, for instance, with the addition of the Korodu ceramic industry, and the Barclay Bank also invested in electricity infrastructure in Lagos. Of course, the usage of generators was severely limited to big commercial and industrial complexes in Lagos, and such efforts at private generation merely supplemented the supply by the ECN. And this was quite laudable during this period, although power supply in the colonial era was grossly inadequate. The situation was not deplorable in the same degree and intensity with the post-colonial era. So the situation worsened in the post-colonial period. So it is now for you in your reading, as you read through the text, so you need to decipher which regimes, colonial, post-colonial, could be credited for electricity development in Lagos. To what extent can we say the post-colonial government has actually done well with regards to electricity generation in Lagos? It was just last week that the Lagos government now promised to invest heavily in generating electricity that will supply the whole of Lagos. But look at 1898 when colonial authorities started these initiatives, and even though it had its own challenges, but to a large extent, people enjoy some sense of electricity facilities in Lagos compared to what we have. Although things have changed, the landscape has expanded, population demography has also increased, but it needs to be questioned the kind of innovation that has been brought to bear by the post-colonial regimes in Lagos. So the post-colonial era, 1960 to date, became quite problematic. So the state of power supply deteriorated, increasingly, in Lagos since the 1960s. It has deteriorated. Initially, the years 1965 and 1966 were often regarded as worst years of power, shortages, power crisis in Lagos. Most recent contemporary realities also in Lagos shows no meaningful progress in terms of electricity supply. The First Republic in Lagos experienced, pardon me please, the First Republic experienced acute shortage of power supply, and this was blamed on technical managerial crisis arising from poor installations of large turbines at the Jora Power Station in 1963, in addition to delay in commissioning of new kilowatt plants, for instance, leading to collapse of the Jora power stations. All right, with the exception of 1967 and 1968, when the condition changed relatively due to the commissioning of the Kainji Dam hydroelectric project. Lagosians have had to cope with irregular power supply since the post-colonial period, and the problem became so critical, all right, when the National Electric Power Authorities was created. With the establishment of National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, the sector actually experienced some level of decay, as I'm going to demonstrate. That means that NEPA, throughout its period of operation, failed to meet the demands of consumers in Lagos from the 1970s. In May 1975, 2 of the 4 power stations at Kainji broke down and defied efforts to repair them. Right? This also plunged the entire nation, not just Lagos, into crisis, as many industries, the vast of which were in Lagos, ground to a halt during this period. And throughout this period, especially from 1980s to 1990s and even the 2000s, the issue became a recurring decimal. Even as we speak, of course, it is no longer a Lagos problem. For instance, it is a national problem, but it is a Lagos problem in the sense that if the colonial government could generate electricity for Lagos as far back as 1898 and 1920s, why has it been impossible for the Lagos state, government to provide to generate electricity, for the state, which is being dubbed a mega city and now a smart city? So this is a very critical question that we must interrogate. Between 1980 and 2002, power supply was more severe than the situation in the 1960s or even in the colonial period. When unstable electric power was prevalent, darkness, as it was said in Isaiah chapter 60, darkness covers the earth and gross darkness the face of the people. As you've seen during this period, there was a wide gap between demand and supply and electric power sector. NEPA's low megawatt was particularly oversubscribed. That is perhaps due to the demographic explosion, the population increase in Lagos, and the investment policy of NEPA was the investment policy of NEPA as to size and timing of power project has been so suboptimal, so low, so ridiculous, so little, right, compared to the rising population. The net effect, the overarching effect of this has been a continuous pressure of demand on capacity, leading to plants installation breakdown and consequently power outage in Lagos. Throughout the years of NEPA in Nigeria, particularly in Lagos, electricity was so erratic that NEPA was derided, never expect power always. All right, most of you were quite young and wouldn't live through the era of NEPA, where NEPA was derided, was known as never expect power always. And this is in view of its failure to meet the stupendous rise in the demand for electricity in Lagos. Today, the entire Lagos lives in some areas lives with less than 2 hours of electricity per day, and this is quite very, very ridiculous. This cannot be exonerated from years of neglect and wrong government policy. Also, the breakdown of companies and relocation of several companies to other African countries such as Ghana, Benin Republic, Togo. All of this actually is due to the inefficiency of electricity generation in Lagos. All right, the inefficiency of the government and the private sector in sustaining the electricity sector. The situation, apart from unemployment, had created inflation in prices of goods and commodities. For instance, cement, beer, soft drink, textile, motorcycle, food product and other industrial goods had been a major have received inflation as a result of poor electricity. So some of the causes of electricity sector, some of the causes of electricity, poor electricity in Lagos are they vary. The causes of electricity insufficiency or inefficiency varies. First is that there is the inability of the installed capacity of NEPA over the years, NEPA generator to cope with the demand in Lagos, as the population continues to rise, all right, and the infrastructure, the installations are quite suboptimal and inefficient to cater for the needs of everybody. Number two is that historically, all the thermal and hydroelectric plants are quite insufficient to make significant difference to the power sector equation in Lagos. And another point is that it relates to poor distribution of the short power generation. The little power that is generated, there is poor distribution and shortfall. All right, and another problem is also that many consumers also engage in illegal connection, often in connivance with with serving or former NEPA employees in Lagos. And also is that electricity cables and poles all right, are routinely damaged by bush burning, domestic fire incidents, rainstorms, and vehicle accidents, and most times they are stolen by criminals. All right, and all of this contributes significantly to the poor electricity infrastructure in Lagos. There is also the cost of replacement of these installations, which generally give rise to delays in effecting repairs, and this prolong the resultant power cuts in many areas in Lagos. There is inefficiency and corruption, all right? Inefficient debt collection, mismanagement of funds, sabotage of equipment by vendors within and outside the NEPA, and even PHCN, and even ECO and Ikeja and other electric, the private sector. The issue of prebendalism has been there with NEPA, but corruption and mismanagement of resources and assets are also very, very obvious in the sector. There is a fluctuating level, water level at Kenji, and a host of other factors which have compounded the problem. Then there is also the NEPA. Before it was privatized, NEPA's dismal record of debt collection of big companies and government agencies through aiding and abetting practices also compounded the problem. All right, and in most cases, if an agency's, a public or private agency's electricity bill was 200,000 naira, these agencies will connive with NEPA officials, all right, who will devalue the cost to 80,000 naira, while they will pay some kickbacks to the officials. And this has contributed, all of these factors are lighted above serve as obstacle to electricity supply in Lagos. With regards to vandalization, there is no country in the world where public property and infrastructure facilities were vandalized, as we have seen in Lagos and other parts of Nigeria. The crime has been perpetrated directly. Most of the crime has been perpetrated directly by serving or retired NEPA, PHCN, ECO, or other employees of workers in the electricity sector. All right, most of them connive with gangs and who operate who uproot most of these installations, and this reflects lack of patriotism of these criminals to the Nigerian state, in addition to lack of effective sanction system, as well as national culture of greed and mindless accumulation of wealth. That people just want to be wealthy by stealing public facility, by destroying public facilities and infrastructure. So I've talked about NEPA's dismal record of debts, collection of big companies and government agencies through aiding and abetting practices. NEPA's greatest debtors in most cases are usually the private and government agencies, where the aiding and abetting are actually alarming. And it is also can be said that mismanagement has been a long-standing feature of the operation of the private electricity sector, both in colonial and post-colonial period. Startling revelation from research into the activities of high-rank government officials in the Ministry of Power, and still since 1960 up to 1970, up to 1980s and 1990s, revealed that most of the funds allocated for capital and recurrent expenditure by NEPA were never expended as budgeted. All right, large-scale fraud has been associated with energy sector since the inception. As a matter of fact, NEPA's woes is also due to great debt portfolio, and this has placed NEPA in a most precarious financial position. And it is not just generating enough fund that is the problem, but the issue of poor revenue collection and monumental fraud. With all of this, NEPA, the electricity sector, the National Ministry of Power would not generate, distribute, and transmit electricity to satisfy the demand of its consumers. The deplorable situation has compelled the consumers in Lagos to resort to various schemes of self-help, such as use of generators, candles, hurricane lanterns, which has been the situation and now people use inverters, and other alternative energy, sources. So this has been a recurring problem since the colonial post-colonial period, and the situation remains the same. And the question is, where do we go from here? Thank you. Any question